backups. Perfect. Because I can't keep asking Shane for the rest of his life to continue to come and speak and present his topic, his paper. So this is a student just like you guys that wrote his paper. And I think hopefully you guys read his paper. I sent it out to you guys. That got picked up for ITSEC. And then the presentation that Shane's going to provide is what he presented at ITSEC. And so you kind of get to see this, but the information in it is really, really interesting because it also connects a lot of other concepts and ideas that aren't specifically like technology, like we think of on the immersive technology side. And you're going to see that, and then we'll unpack that after he's done. And hopefully, so as you guys are listening to Shane, see if you can pick up on some of the things that he's talking about that aren't specifically about things that you would see basically in like VR or AR of other concepts. Where is he pulling from other places and bringing that in to make this connection about augmented reality? So keep that in your mindset as we're going to pass this over to Shane. And so Shane, let me pass it to you, let you introduce yourself. So glad you're back again. I'm hitting record, so I don't have to keep asking you every like 5 months or 4 months to come present. But man, thank you so much coming back. Guys, every time Shane presents and I read his paper, I learn something new from it. It's one of my most favorite papers and topics because augmented reality is not mostly written on a lot. Most people write in VR, which is fine, but the augmented side and also as you listen to Shane's paper and presentation here is how can you take his concepts that he's talking through mostly in the augmented reality side, and can it apply in other places like virtual reality and mixed reality? So keep that in mind too as we listen to Shane. But Shane, let me pass it to you, sir.
Hey, thanks for the comments, Andy. Very gracious of you. I know you say that about all your presenters, so but I appreciate the words. But yeah, it's a beautiful day here in Utah, so I'm actually outside. That's why I'm wearing sunglasses. I'm not inside. I'm not one of those guys. But and I appreciate being here. Feel free to ask questions as I go. Also, because I'm outside, you might hear the sound of freedom a couple times, so I may just pause on my own or somebody wave in front of their camera to stop. So if you can't hear me well, I'll just make a judgment call as I go here. So bear with me, and I'm going to start sharing the presentation here. So hopefully you guys can see the first slide. Thumbs up from anybody? Okay, awesome. So I guess with that, I'll just jump into it. And this is largely how I talked through it at ITSEC when I got presented. So here we go. Let's see. All right, so the idea I offered in my paper, Environment Extension, was about designing immersive experiences in augmented and mixed reality. It was about increasing presence during your experience so you feel like you're actually there. I'll touch on how to get there through several practical techniques, but more importantly, I'll first discuss why it works. Environment Extension is an approach to leveraging an intrinsic vulnerability in the human psyche to increase presence and subsequently enhance immersion. But before we talk about how we get there, I first want to look backwards. I'd like to take us back to a story first introduced in 1999. Many of us were exposed to a film that portrayed a dystopian future where the human civilization had been largely trapped, unwittingly, by intelligent machines in a simulated reality called the Matrix. After being told that his entire life was merely a simulation programmed by AI overlords, he's offered two options, right? Take a blue pill, stay in the Matrix, and believe whatever he wants to believe, or take a red pill and leave the simulation, learn the truth, and help the rebels fight back. I saw this movie no less than 3 times in the theater when it came out. Why? Was it the deep religious and philosophical undertones permeating throughout the film? Maybe. But it was also cool. Why was it cool? Why did I keep coming back? The cinematography was groundbreaking for the times, but mostly I was captivated by the story. It's the story that pulled me into the experience. I was immersed in a thrilling narrative that kept me coming back for more. You've probably had similar feelings of being immersed, if not from a movie, maybe a book or a video game, maybe your favorite synthetic reality experience. These mediums are no different than those other ones in that they offer an opportunity to be immersed. Now, there's a lot to admire out there, yet some capture your imagination more than others. Why are some AR and MR experiences enduring and others more perishable? After the novelty wears off, What are we left with? This is why we all strive. This is what we all strive for, right? Leaping, bounding through a synthetic world. I don't know if I've ever been this excited, but I do know that I want to be her. So how do you design this immersion into the experiences, particularly in AR and MR? Let's start with the definition of immersion. Whether it's virtual, augmented, or mixed reality, immersion is the holy grail of synthetic experiences. This is because generally the community accepts that immersion occurs when you feel physically within the synthetic experience. When the user puts on that headset, they're no longer thinking about where they are. They're 100% focused on where the headset is taking them. Because this is what we really want, right? We want users laser focused on our simulation objectives, dialed in, focused. So what separates some experiences from the other? How do we get to this point? Let's start with where he is psychologically. We call this the affective medium. Affective learning mediums are those that not only teach the user new information, but they make the user want to learn. It's widely accepted that when you're motivated to learn, you're more apt to retain the data and apply yourself. This is the affective medium. We want users in this headspace so they focus harder, retain better, and learn faster. But how do you get immersed and reach this affective medium? How do we design augmented and mixed reality so that the user wants to stay and see where the rabbit hole goes? For many, we want the users to don that headset and turn this into this, where precious time in a simulated environment has resulted in meeting training objectives in the most efficient way possible. This not only results in increased performance, it can save time and money. So if the immersion occurs when the user feels physically there, and the ultimate goal is the affective medium, that optimal headspace that drives user focus and retention, how do we employ augmented and mixed reality in a methodical way? The literature points to presence. The more presence the user feels, the greater the sense of being part of the experience and the more immersive it is. Presence is widely accepted as a feeling of being there. It makes sense for virtual reality, right? The VR headset is trying to transport you to where it's projecting into your field of view. This is a clear target for virtual reality. But in augmented and mixed reality, where is there? In augmented reality, most of what you see is the physical space around you with synthetic content kind of sprinkled in. So is presence in augmented reality just feeling right where you are? Is presence even possible in augmented reality? In mixed reality, there could go either way depending on implementation. You can dial up or dial down the amount of synthetic content in the scene. What I found was a lexicon built and geared for fully synthetic virtual reality experiences, but not for augmented and mixed reality ones. So I began opening the aperture because thinking about presence and immersion in terms of location is conceptually limiting. And beyond problematic terminology, augmented and mixed reality are introducing new ways to interact with the user that aren't possible in virtual reality. But today's experiences typically use spatial computing to simply just drop content in space as if it was just floating magically in front of you. This basic methodology may have utility, but does not fully exercise spatial computing's potential. We need to better integrate content in a way that enables the user to intuitively navigate the experience because our brains are wired in defined ways to ingest what's happening to us and make sense of it every day. And augmented and mixed reality, because it's becoming more ubiquitous, we need to make sure that they make it count when they build these experiences. So how do we design an experience that leaves that enduring impression once the novelty wears off? Because we're going to get right back to here, right? I'm interested in getting to the why. Why do some experiences delight us more than others? And why are these experiences more effective in reaching affective mediums over others? One way to get there is through what I'm calling environment extension. I contend that optimizing for passive interactions, in particular those at the seam of where the real world meets the synthetic, you can maximize a holistic sense of presence and ultimately lead to enhanced immersion. I call it environment extension because it borrows from the concept of self-extension, where one can leverage an individual's subconscious to make what's happening to their stuff feel like a direct action against them personally. So environment extension is all about influencing the user's physical surroundings, think floors, think walls, think your personal bubble, to hack their brain so they feel like the synthetic experience is a real human experience happening to them in real time. So where do we start? Well, to increase immersion, many have pointed to more interactivity, some going as far as saying that it is the most important factor to increasing immersion. So it's not just a tool to level up your immersion, it may be the tool to get there. But let's dive a little deeper into what I mean by interactivity. Interactivity or interactions in a synthetic environment generally means the user's ability to modify the virtual environment. You're inside the simulation, you push it, you pull it, you twist it, you bop it, the things you do. And there are three basic relationships: interactions with objects, interactions with agents, and the environment itself. Now, in virtual reality, interactivity is purely synthetic, right? The user interacts with synthetic things in the scene, whether it's people or the room itself, and it's fully simulated. But in augmented and mixed reality, these interactions can occur in a new interaction regime entirely, where you can also interact with real world physical objects and people in the room, not just what your headset's showing it. And those same physical objects can act as inputs to the experience as well, versus solely just initiated by you. So that means augmented and mixed reality has opened up new possibilities with this merger of the synthetic and physical worlds, enabling the physical augmentation of the synthetic and synthetic augmentation of the physical. This bidirectional influence is unique to augmented and mixed reality environments and reveals a new dimension of interactivity. And you may be asking, haven't we squeezed all the juice we can out of user interactions? Sounds like an old topic. Been there, done that. I contend no, because designers and users are always in their never-ending pursuit of their own oasis, right? Their own metaverse, right? People are still pushing those boundaries, and augmented and mixed reality, being as nascent as it is still ripe for improvement. And so it's really just trying to be a little bit more deliberate when you design those environments. So there are two real categories of, let's say, interaction regimes. There's active and there's passive. Active interactions are deliberate actions intended by the user. So like I said, they're the things you do. They often are viewed through a user-centered lens where direct physical inputs generate a synthetic output. Passive interactions occur whether the user initiated it or not, essentially covering everything else occurring in the simulation. Said another way, active interactions occur when the user does something on purpose and the synthetic medium responds. Deliberate action, reaction, like skipping a rock. The user swings their arm and lets go, and they see a rock release and skip away. Passive interactions encompass everything else happening in the experience. What's in the background? What does the texture of the rock feel like? How heavy is it? What sound does the rock make as it skips along the surface of the water? The resulting splashing and ripples in the water. How does the lake smell? The user's goal wasn't the sound effects or creating ripples in the water, it was skipping a rock, but the user still benefits from these passive interactions experientially. Passive interactions add complexity and depth to the user's experience. And so in every latent physical structure and contour now available through augmented and mixed reality, because you can see that physical environment around you, lies opportunity to show the user how real and integrated their new hybrid reality really is. And today's augmented and mixed reality experiences are saturated with the active variety. You touch it, you pull it, you push it, you bop it, right? But the passive ones are underdeveloped. They need further exploration, especially given the immaturity of augmented and mixed reality. And environment extension really just seeks to exploit this immature arena by focusing on how tightly synthetic content can be integrated with your physical surroundings to hack your subconscious, because that's what makes this work. It comes down to human psychology. Environment extension is simply tapping into the human subconscious through this thing called self-extension theory, which establishes that an individual's self-identity up here is wrapped up in their physical surroundings. This could be your body, for people that like to focus on that. This could be your family, it could be your clothes that you choose to wear every day. It could be your car, it could be your home. These physical attachments help contribute to how you define who you are. And we see this theory invoked when talking about virtual body ownership. You'll see that in the literature sometimes, where when you tightly integrate virtual limbs to your own in a simulated environment, it tricks your head into thinking that when you see something happen to your virtual limb, you involuntarily will react as it happened to your real one, even though it's all synthetic, right, and not really happening to your actual arm. This is self-extension theory at play. And the research supports that by exploiting this psychological phenomenon, we can increase presence in synthetic environments. So by extending this concept further beyond the body into the immediate physical environment, The user's surroundings serve as an extension of the user's self-identity as well. Because when it's integrated into your living room and hanging on your wall, sitting on your couch, that proximity is setting the conditions for an even more visceral experience. It turns out that proximity is one of the main self-extension triggers, referred to as contamination. It occurs when proximity to other physical phenomena can result in feelings of personal identity. So when synthetic content is occupying your living room, hanging on your wall, and sitting on your couch, it is contaminating your environment. And by extension, it's contaminating you. Because that proximity is now contributing to a heightened sense of ownership of the hybrid, augmented, or mixed reality environment, and subsequently it increases presence and immersion of that experience. We see contamination at work and public transport at play in public transportation, for example, when our personal space is suddenly invaded. Why do we care? Well, we have programmed in our heads the extent of our personal bubble, let's say. And when someone enters that space, your senses are heightened, right? And you know immediately whether you're okay with it or not, without even thinking about it, right? Same could be said for even a warm seat maybe you've encountered in a room before. Have you ever sat down in a chair unaware that someone just left it, but you abruptly find out as you feel their warmth become yours? Did it make you feel uncomfortable maybe, or maybe move to the seat next to you? Guilty, right? Those are the types of examples of contamination. And what's their worry about, right? Their body heat or sweat isn't going to necessarily bring harm to you, but that proximity to your clothes and your personal space makes you feel contaminated nonetheless and drives you to distraction. But contamination isn't all bad. We can have positive experiences through proximity, like eating the right foods. Nothing closer to you than sharing the same space with it, right? That feeling you get perhaps when you are eating something healthy, you also start feeling healthy too. That is an example of positive contamination. So in the same way, the food that we put in our body or what we allow in our personal space feels deeply personal. Self-extension theory can be applied to our physical environment as well, evoking similar visceral feelings. Think about your childhood home and the room you grew up in. You probably have strong attachments to certain objects and spaces where a large portion of your memories growing up were made. If you went back, those same spaces might feel warm, welcoming, maybe a part of who you are, if they're still there. The inverse of that is also true, right? If your childhood home burnt down, you likely would feel some loss, like a part of you burnt away with it. So just like ownership over our bodies, we exhibit that same ownership over the places we reside, work, and spend our time. This is a picture of my home office when I was last in Montgomery writing this paper. And here's my home office extended to the synthetic, with 3 additional synthetic monitors and a whiteboard and on the back wall. When synthetic content contaminates those same intimate spaces, it can feel quite personal. Anchoring synthetic content to real objects and surfaces through passive interactions anchors the synthetic experience and delivers a more seamless, believable experience that the user perceives actually happening to them. We want to harness this good contamination so we can get right back to here, right? Where more presence and immersion leads to more learning by the affective medium. It's fundamentally psychological. Environment extension is all about just believing that real-time synthetic features of the experience are no different than the physical ones. And it's about tricking your brain into thinking that what's happening to your environment is really happening to you. But how do you put these things into practice? Well, we can borrow from architectural design, where designers typically use things called interface metaphors or design patterns to help categorize interface techniques. Given its emerging nature, augmented and mixed reality is deficient in fully developed techniques, and most techniques are generally focused on the active ones, not the passive ones, and even fewer are focused on ones in the environment. So I'll highlight a few passive interaction strategies I've observed to date and recommend some new implementations along the way that fall into these categories. We'll start with something familiar. Windowing is a form of passive interaction that has roots in classic GUI design, graphic user interface design, like you're used to with a computer. Ever wonder why we call those things windows on your computer? But think beyond switching between 2D representations of data. In synthetic realities, we can use windows to see outside or somewhere else entirely, or allow others to see you inside of your room. It's passive because they're not there, or you're not there to make a window. It's a means to an end. Global interactions cover your physics-based stuff, like gravity, parallax, occlusion, shadows, reflections. And reflections should include synthetic objects too, right? I should be able to see in my bathroom mirror at home a reflection of maybe some synthetic art hanging on the wall behind me. Another novel example might look like a synthetic flame jumping between synthetic and real world objects in a scene. You need the synthetic to look and follow the same physical laws like you see in a physics-based world, right, in reality, to maintain that illusion of a seamless reality. That said, if your aim is to, let's say, emulate something a little bit more whimsical, like outer space or being on the moon, being underwater, you can follow, the notional physical properties of that environment. Imprinting interactions occur when the synthetic environment responds to physical contact from the user's body, such as muddy hand or footprints, or let's say impressions left on a sandy beach as you walk through it. This passive interaction is not just something you see, you could be hearing those footsteps as well, right? Are your footsteps echoing, commensurate with the texture of the floor and the size of the room? Perhaps you're hearing how sticky the floors or walls are when you pull your hand away from it. When synthetic content is constructed on top of the floor, inside or outside, this interaction type is called constructing. This is the designer basically utilizing terrestrial features of the landscape in the physical world as a foundation for building up synthetic content. They could be staircases, statues, or entire buildings. Fixtures cover synthetic content you'd affix to real world walls or ceilings. So these things could appear temporarily or permanently attached, can range from signage and control panels like the one seen here, or to artwork and chandeliers. Tunneling interactions leverage physical contours of the room to allow synthetic content to traverse between synthetic and real spaces. Could look like everyday doors and hallways to alien robots breaking through your walls. Extruding interactions pull the physical extent of the user's experience to add spatial depth, like underground layers shown here, wider and taller rooms, extruding a ceiling to produce a sense of being in a tall tower. Perhaps your government cubicle walls could finally be pushed out to reveal that open office format you've always dreamed about that you hear about the tech companies have. MA, or negative space interactions, take advantage of the space in between. Ma is actually a Japanese architectural and cultural concept translating to space or emptiness, and it celebrates the gaps between things, right, between structures and between objects. Ma interactions could entail synthetic rain, not just falling around you, but actually splashing when it hits the floor or hits your skin. They could describe synthetic smoke swirling around you as you walk through a room, or even seeing your breath in a simulated Arctic setting. And finally, fusion interactions encompass those phenomena typically invisible to the human eye. So fusion interactions fuse physical phenomena outside the limit of your eyeball with the visible spectrum. So I'm talking about visually representing percussive sound waves reverberating through the air, or you could be seeing, electromagnetic waves kind of like propagating through space, or simulated X-ray vision. Depending on the sensors on board your headset, fusion interactions may not be imitations at all. It could be enabling real-time heat or night vision for a DoD operator. Ultimately, holistic spatial integration of the physical environment simply just completes the narrative. Synthetic content cannot just appear or float nonsensically in space. Passive environmental interactions help the synthetic story to be believable in the context of the physical world it's planted in. A sense of presence and immersion is psychological after all, right? It has everything to do with your feelings. In augmented and mixed reality, presence has less to do with where you are and location, and more to do with how you perceive the experience. Therefore, definitions of presence should not be confined to location and feelings of just being there. Presence should be defined as a state of being. Recall the two options offered to our protagonist from the Matrix movie, right? Take the blue pill, stay in the simulation, ignorant of the real world, or take the red pill and keep it real in the physical. Well, I'd like to offer you a third option. It's called the purple pill. It will neither keep you stuck in the mundane real world or lost in a simulation. I invite you to a new hybrid reality where unparalleled presence and immersion is achieved through passive environmental interactions, seamlessly merging both worlds to reach the affective learning medium and enhance our human experiences. Because while focusing on active interactions can help you believe that what you are doing is real, passive interactions will help you believe your reality is real. And that's what I got.
Oh yeah, there we go. I get my mute mode. Awesome, great. Shane, cool, thank you. Okay, so class, thoughts, questions, comments on this concept of environment extension, understanding presence when it comes to more augmented reality, mixed reality. We've been talking about virtual reality, immersion and presence. Guys, we've looked through the taxonomy. We've talked about that, right? Immersion, the type of stimuli, presence, right? The effect it has. But when it comes to augmented reality and virtual reality, right? How do you create that presence? It's not being there, like Shane mentioned. And if you remember the taxonomy, right? Augmented reality on that column on the taxonomy is up front, right? It gets a score of like 0 or 1 because it doesn't give you a lot of presence, right? It doesn't make it more immersive, or right? Or at least what we're doing right now with augmented reality doesn't do that, right? And then VR, and then 360, it goes, I think it's augmented reality, 360, and then VR on the technology side, right? So the augmented reality is up high where it shows little immersion and presence for to make something immersive on the taxonomy chart. But Shane is saying, let's look at that, right? How can we make augmented reality and mixed reality immersive? What do we need to understand that to make that concept more real for presence? And like Shane mentioned, it's about the state of being, right? It's the perception. And so, because in VR, I can take you somewhere and you're there, right? You're in VR, you're there. But in augmented reality, you're in your space, right? So how do I take you somewhere and make it feel present or more immersed when I'm providing augmented content in your space somewhere? Well, it doesn't seem like I'm very immersed in that. That's why on the taxonomy, it's up high with a score of 1 or 0. And that's what Shane is saying here is like, we got to look at this and bringing up these concepts of environment extension, contamination theory, architectural design concepts that he brought in, these different parts that he just brought in, MAW and negative space and some of these things. So I'm just kind of, I get super excited because it was such a thought process that I never thought of. And I think quite ITSEC people brought it up, and even the augmented stuff that's happening now, you're starting to see some of it in augmented spaces and stuff, but it's still not in its application because people just aren't thinking in this process. Let me pause there and let you guys think. Yeah, okay, I'm looking at the chat there. Guys, questions or thoughts or comments? What did you guys see? What did you guys pick up on?
I noticed that you mentioned it was a couple years ago, and it still seems like a relevant and not outdated take that he has on things. And while there is progress, I think it just goes to show how slow it can be without widespread awareness of the benefits.
Yeah, Rob, I think you're spot on. Right, industry just doesn't pick up on some of these things because I think a lot that, especially doing the augmented side, it's more about being able to display something in your space, right, without thinking about or the effects, if you will, right, the presence that you're trying to create. But maybe a lot of the augmented reality people aren't even thinking about trying to create this presence as much, right, because they know augmented reality doesn't give you that kind of presence like it does in VR. Like I can take you somewhere, I can take you there into VR, but augmented. So while those industries don't focus on that, but what if we did, right? And here's even a bigger question. What if we actually took Shane's concepts here, where he's focused through augmented and mixed reality, and take these concepts and look at it in the VR lens? How many VR industry companies that build these things that they take you there aren't applying these concepts that Shane's talking about? And if they did, would it make that experience even more immersive and have more presence for that individual if they use some of Shane's concepts, this environment extension and contamination theory, and understanding that? Because we mentioned it, you guys saw, I think hopefully in the chat there, we went to Engage. You guys remember us going to the beach and we're walking around on the beach, and we walked into the water and our clothes changed to a bathing suit. And I think I even mentioned it. Hey guys, look at the sand, right? As we're walking around, there's no sand, there's no footprints in the sand. And I think I mentioned it's like, guys, we're gonna have a conversation about this, and we have a guest lecturer that's going to come and talk to you guys about this. And this was like weeks ago. I mentioned it while we were engaged. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I was teeing it up a little bit, but I didn't want to overdo it then because I wanted Shane to be able to show it to you guys. But that's an example, right, of in the Engage platform, them not using environment extension, right? So as an example there, other examples that you guys see how Shane's concepts can be applied, whether it's AR and mixed reality, or even in the VR, like I just gave as an example. What are you guys' thoughts? Any examples?
Yeah, this is embarrassing. I'm thinking back to when Pokemon Go came out. I was a lieutenant in Korea, and we all went up to the Northeast to the one place where we had access to Pokemon Go because you had to play it. These ideas would make the most righteous game. It would really improve that because it was clearly wanted. Like people wanted that game, even though it was in its infancy. But it clearly just projected a digital world over top of things that made no sense. You'd see Pikachu just dancing on top of a kimchi bowl, and you're like, dude, that doesn't even check. That makes no sense
Yep.
at all. But even in its infancy, people really responded to the tech, and this was not VR. They would run out and drive 3 hours before they could get access to this game. But one quote from your paper, man, that really stood out to me, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but you said, many strive for the user to forget the computer is there. The real goal is to enable the user to accept the computer is there. And that just kind of changed my thinking completely. And that just stuck with me. I highlighted that. I thought that was brilliant.
It's a great statement. Shane, yeah, up on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, on a couple points. Yeah, no, I like that line too, because like, obviously everyone knows they're wearing a headset, right? And that maybe some of this, like there's something assisting you at the time, but the intent is just to not make it a distraction. Like it just becomes so seamless where it's just like, oh, okay, this is really cool. This is happening. And I believe it's happening because it's just so integrated. And on the Pokemon Go, so yeah, that was, I mean, they were just way ahead of their time, right? I mean, that was really the first instance of mixed reality kind of at scale. And, and then, I think others have tried to come behind it and they're still not there. I think technology is a limb fact to a degree, right? Being able to pack into a small headset all the things you would need to look at everything in a scene, know exactly where it is, and then accurately plant things on top of things and have those things interact. Like I think that's probably one of the limb facts, but I think you guys have probably all noticed if you've ever put on a headset, whether it's a mixed reality one or a virtual reality one, like I think people just make stuff without deliberately thinking about like why they're doing what they're doing. Like, what are they? I think they just do it because it's cool or because they can do it, but not necessarily doing it in a methodical way. And so this just is trying to provide, I guess, somewhat of a framework to say, well, if you could really, we're just saying we're all used to living in the real life. Just try to get as close to that as possible because we're inherently spatially aware beings. Like from when we're born, trying to understand our physical world, feeling and touching everything, just trying to figure out how to take a step and how to crawl, right? Like that spatial awareness is tied to like our evolution. So if you can tap into that is just so powerful because that is how our minds are geared.
Thanks, Astor, for that comment. Thanks, Shane. That's an awesome reply.
Hey, so this is one of the articles we read this week or videos that we watched. And so rather than sitting in front of a window, right, to see your significant other, your loved one in like a almost three-dimensional space, you can just put on your headset in your own home and have a conversation with your family or your whomever, right, and have that much more intimate connection. You're in your home. I'm relating it to like my husband and I were a military spouse, like spraying his cologne and then having him, and just having that like connection with him, would be really nice. So,
and Jolene, you just hit on a part, right? Going back from last week when I gave you guys all that info about smell, right? And so, right, we Engage and in other platforms, we have that spatial audio, right? So we're in these VR spaces. If we walk away from each other, I can't hear you because that's how the physical real world is. So that is an environment extension that's applied in VR, right? So that's that spatial audio, right? Spatial scent is the same thing, right? If I'm in VR, I have that headset on, like you hopefully guys saw some of the stuff from the OVR company, right? And they have that little thing that sits underneath the headset and it can release those different smells while you're in VR. Or let's now take it to augmented reality, and right, and we have this, whether it's the specialized Google digital glass, right, that can portray somebody on the glass, or it's a hollow telepresence, a hollow beam type augmented person in your space, and it's your husband, significant other, and then whatever device is doing that is able to release a smell, right? That's an environment extension, right? Because your spouse has a smell, and if they're augmentedly present in front of you, right? What are those environment extensions that should be applied, right, to make it feel like you have more presence in augmented reality or in virtual reality, right? And so you just gave a great example of augmented or a mixed reality environment. We're using a hollow beam or something like that, right, to talk to a significant other. But what are some environment extensions that can be applied to that as well? And you gave an example of the smell. It's a great example. I love it. Awesome. What else? Any other thoughts? What else you guys got? Any other questions or comments for Shane, since we have him here for a little bit before we got to let him get back to work? What else? Anything?
I've got something here. In terms of how you developed the paper, I'm assuming you're not a psychologist or anything. How did you start? Did you come up with the idea of you liked augmented reality, and then you just started coming across theories and pieced it together? Or did you see a theory that you liked and then it led you to augmented reality? What advice, I guess, do you have for me, and I guess some of us that are trying to figure out how we're going to go about this paper?
Yeah, sure. No, good question. Yeah, I think I did have a just personal interest in, I mean, all things, virtual and augmented and mixed. I mean, it was obvious that the augmented and mixed stuff was, because, you know, there isn't an Oculus headset, right, that is widely available that does augmented and mixed reality stuff, right? Because that stuff is still pretty expensive, right? They're still making those headsets as enterprise headsets, so it's not commercially available for the masses, right? Because they haven't made that a commercially viable product for them yet. So, but you know, because I happened to be local to Maxwell, we actually have some of these headsets there, and was able to put some of those on, and it really piqued my interest. And then how I got started on, I guess, the topic, like, yeah, it's hard, right? Because I mean, there's just, where do you start, right? And you know, for me, it was just you kind of start with where the literature is, I guess, right? You know, you can go to the databases, the online databases that the Air University offers you access to, or just use Google Scholar, right? And just see what people are writing about, see how they're thinking through the problem. Because, you know, kind of through a process of deduction, you might have a new take on something that you're not reading about out in the literature, and then that kind of becomes your paper idea, right? It's like, hey, has everyone ever thought about this? And then you could actually Google Scholar that, or look up papers to see if anyone has looked down that vein, because, you know, you can take one little sliver of a niche and write a whole paper on that, even though if someone might have thought about it the way you did before, it may not be the exact way they thought about it. Or maybe you want to couple that with some other interesting theory that you've read about or heard about, or you come across, and you kind of want to merge those two things together to kind of try to say, hey, I think there's some there if we approached it this way, or thought about things this way, or thought about applying and implementing, you know, AR, VR, whatever, this way. So you start to see what people aren't talking about, and that's where I think the idea spur, because you just say, well, you know, I see what they did there, but I'm thinking about it this way, and you can start to see if anyone else has, and if, you know, you're the first one, or you just want to modify what someone else is looking at the problem, or because, you know, there's different ways to approach papers, right? Like there's the theoretical, if you want to stick in the theory land and say, hey, how can I apply this? But then there's the application piece, right? You know, like, hey, here's a novel space, a novel career field, or a novel application in the DoD where I don't see this, where this could be fruitful for these reasons, right? And so you can play in different areas where people just maybe not be thinking that this could help them in their particular, let's say, mission area.
Yeah, and I remember Shane doing his paper since he was here. I just sent you guys a picture of Shane from class He was physically here, so we had physical class. And he was able to check out a HoloLens. And so that's why if you saw in his presentation, his actual office, he used the HoloLens and brought that stuff up. Yeah, Rob, that's a great question, is right, is how do we start to develop these concepts and ideas for our papers? And I think Shane's thing was well, augmented reality isn't probably as immersive. And so how do you make something immersive? Well, what are some of those things that talk about immersiveness? So like for a lot of us, if you guys are looking at some of those things, like Shane did at the very beginning of his presentation, he defined immersion. Now he gave you that simple dictionary definition, but as you guys have seen in lots of articles and things we've done with JJ, right, how we define immersion, how do we define presence? Is there one thing in that definition or that concept that I can pull on and write kind of my paper on that, and pull other things in that apply to that? Like Shane brought in contamination theory, right? And some of the things he talked about on these techniques, right, come from other places like construction and right in this architectural design type things, and from other cultures. And it's a uniqueness that Shane has in this paper. It shows he's brought in other ideas and just said, hey, right, in theory, right, this is really in theory, but it's actually true. We can't have you guys apply it, but in theory, these concepts make sense. And if applied, it would be actually quite more immersive, just like Jolene's example. If I was able to bring in this hollow beam of my spouse, this mixed reality, but I could bring in some environment extensions, that's a theory, right, into this. And so I have his shadow on the floor, and he's at the right physical size, just like me, like a real person. He's not just like this thing like this or whatever that sits on the desk. You've seen videos of people, if you go to LinkedIn and connect with any of the AR, VR type stuff out there, you'll see people that are in this space that are developing things and like, oh, look, I have this little horse running around on my desk. Well, that's not real. I mean, it's there and it's cool that they can do that, but it's a horse on your desk. But in real life, you don't have a horse on your desk. But if it was a life-size horse that was standing on my desk, I would feel more presence, because I'm like, oh my gosh, right? There's this giant horse on my desk kind of thing, because a horse is big. It's not small like this running around on your desk, right? So this environment extension are things that are important. Negative space, like Shane mentioned, right? When it rains in real life, right, you have a splash, right? When you dump water, there's a splash, other things like that. So if that happens in augmented reality or even in VR, guys, when we're in VR and we're in those simulations and there's rain in the environment, right? Why isn't it not splashing up? And they do that in the movies, right? There's all that cinematography, all that CGI stuff, right? Like in the Matrix, when all that stuff is CGI, they made the rain, but they also made sure that the rain splashed up, and then there was a reflection in the water. That's all the environment extensions to make sure that it's actually as real as it can be, right? So a lot of that came from probably the entertainment that Shane was thinking through of how other industries do this. So it doesn't have to be this like VR specific thing, and like you have to reach some training objective or something like that. Your guys' concepts and thoughts on this can go kind of wherever, looking at other industries, or across other. I know there's a lot of psychology that's happening here in this concepts, but we don't have to be a psychologist to know that these theories work. That contamination theory, yeah, we all have been there standing next to somebody who smells, and you're like, right? So what is that concept? Contamination theory. Can I apply that to something else like augmented or VR? Right? We've seen it in VR, right? When we stand too close together in VR, everybody backs up, right? Your personal bubble space gets in the way. That's part of that contamination theory. We just never know we just don't have a name for it. A lot of people know that, hey, don't get my personal bubble space. A lot of the VR games have that thing where you can check your settings, put a space around you so they can't get close to you, or turn that space off so you can be as close to people as you want in VR. It's there. People put that. So we know there's something about that, but we never give it really much of a name or on the academic side of things. But Shane has given us a great term for it, contamination theory. Oh, I love it, right? So you can see these things that we're doing, right? What is actually occurring, right? That's causing us to have these opportunities and these functions in VR or augmented reality type stuff. So great question, Rob. Yeah, thanks, Shane, on that one. Sorry, I'm going off on all kinds of things here. It's super exciting because there's so much thought process off of Shane's paper and presentation that can make us think in different ways, and we'll apply it somewhere once we get Shane going here. But anybody else have any questions for Shane, so we can let him get back to work before he probably gets in trouble for not being at work?
Nah, I'm outside. I'd rather be here.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question actually. So Shane, since you wrote this paper, have you had any companies ask to come give a presentation or work with you on things?
I haven't. I sort of just did the ITSEC thing, and then I just like went back to my job, right? So I'm trying to remember if my email or anything was attached to the paper. Because I don't know if they do that, but I think I've heard, Andy talk to
Yeah.
discussions with MIT, because there's some collaborations and stuff. But like obviously, if I were to like keep exploring this area, it would be like trying to measure measure this thing called presence or immersion, or this feeling. Like how do you actually like put metrics to that? Like how do you like know which dials to dial up or dial down? Does footprints and things that your body does is more of a bigger deal versus just like structurally doing something to the walls and ceilings? Like does one increase presence over the other, right? And the only way to do that is like to take like a group of people, put them in through headsets, and then like just the gold standard is surveys. One of the things that I was looking into too is like using one of those like neural headsets, that kind of like looks at your brain activity, and just trying to get more of an objective measure of presence, right? Because it's real time, it's objective, and you can just kind of see how, there's some thoughts out there about what parts of your brain lights up, you know, maybe it's the delight part of your brain, like if you're enjoying an experience versus, or just like that visceral part of it. There are thoughts like they already know like what part of your cortex, to look at, but it would basically try to say, all right, based off of those different interaction buckets that I talked about, like which one matters, right? Like, do they all matter the same, or do some matter more than others? You'd have to take people kind of through environments that focus on those different methodologies, and then see like, all right, that one and that one really kicks up an immersive experience. And then if I was a company, or if I'm not smart enough to design a mixed reality experience, but I would say like that's where you should focus your money and investment, right? Like pour money into that. If you're going to do mixed reality, if you're going to do augmented, if you can just do a couple key things, that's the best bang for your buck, low hanging fruit, right? So but yeah, that would be a fun follow on if maybe when I retire or something.
Yeah. And Shane, I was just looking at,
Thank
your it's in your email is on the paper. And I've spoken to, like Shane mentioned, I did speak to some MIT professors on Shane's paper when I was in an MIT class about a year ago. And this one I always bring this one up when I talk to other people across at least AU and when I go to ITSEC. But yeah, where does this go next is it's always a hard part, because if you look at the picture I sent you guys in chat, that picture of Shane and the other person is actually oh my gosh, I lost her name all of a sudden. Oh, I lost her name. Darn it. Those two people in the picture, Shane and the other one, were both at ITSEC presenting, and Shane's paper probably should have won best paper too. But the other person in that picture, her paper won best paper at ITSEC. She was the one that wrote on flow theory, the flow theory that we've talked about. And so those are two of my super cool, good STAR students. You guys are all super cool STAR students, right? But they've both been done a really good job, and their papers have both been pushed out past just ITSEC. I pushed it out to MIT and a couple others. I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since we've done that. But that's why I have Shane come back, because it really is just there's a lot packed into that paper. And sometimes reading the paper, it's hard to like pick up on everything. But when you hear Shane communicate it and us talk about it in application, man, there's so much in there on just theories and stuff like that. Trying to show you guys ways in which you guys can look at your thoughts and papers and ideas, and how I did it. Shane's all it was about immersion and presence, about augmented reality. So what are those things that I want to kind of look up and write about? And if you guys kind of look at his paper, what did he do? He defined immersion and presence, right? He talked about those things and types of interactivity, right? And so he just kind of looked up what that meant and stuff. So trying to show you some of these papers from the other students and how they kind of organized the paper and what they came up with. And as you notice, most of them put like a picture or two in the paper. That helps with length and stuff like that. It's good to have a visualization of some of the things that we do. So what else? Anything else, guys? Okay, guys, great. Okay, well, great questions. Thanks for the questions and stuff and conversations. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but we won't have to leave Shane on because we're going to tie it to another example from another student that was in, I think, the same class as Shane, Sean Hawkins. Shane, remember him? We did augmented reality debrief thing for the pilot training. He was in the same class, so it was a weird class. And he was a resident student as well, if I remember correctly. Yes, he was he? I can't remember. Gosh, it's been so long.
Was that they did the demo video and all that stuff?
Yeah.
He was remote, but
Okay,
I
thank
know
you.
a PA team put together that sweet video. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about that and stuff. So, but yeah. So, guys, any last things? Anything else for Shane before we go? You guys, you have his paper, so you have his email. So, you guys ever need to reach out, Shane, I'm definitely would, give you guys any advice or guidance or anything like that on something. So, but another great paper, good concept topics, some new theories that we haven't heard of, focusing on the augmented side. So we get to hear that a little bit of those concepts from the augmented reality side. So it was great. Shane, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Friend. Really
Thanks for the
appreciate
question.
this.
Feel free to reach out anytime. Nope.
Thanks, Shane.
All
Awesome.
right, Michelle.
Cool. So we'll see. We're almost at the hour. So let's do this. Let's take a bio break, about a good 10-minute bio break. We're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about this augmented reality debrief system that is now being used in the Air Force. I think you guys maybe saw the video. If not, no biggies. We'll kind of show it here, and then we're going to talk about how it connects to the Shane's topics as well. But let's take that bio break. We'll come back at like 1:38-ish, right before 1:40. We'll see you guys back in just a little bit. I'll stay right here if anybody has any questions or comments or needs to chat on anything.
Hey, Dr. Andy, it's Rob. Question for you on, I've got kind of an idea on my paper or where I want to start, but I wanted to get your thoughts. Maybe you can help me go down a path that will work. So